Wisconsin Eye is at the Green Bay Public Library. We're interviewing candidates in the special election in Senate District 1. Alex Renard is one of two Republican candidates. The May 15 primary, and then the general election is June 12.
Yes.
Alex, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
You're a first-time candidate, so tell us your qualifications for the state Senate.
I'd be happy to. I believe I'm qualified because of my private sector experience. My grandparents, over 50 years ago, started a manufacturing company in Green Bay. I started working there when I was 15 years old, started scrubbing floors and toilets, washing walls, cleaning out machines. From there, I got into project management a little bit, redoing our tool room and our inventory system, working with customers and clients. I was able to work on almost every piece of equipment we have, and to this day still understand it or can run every piece of equipment that we have. In 2011, my father bought the business from my grandparents, and I was given shortly after that the opportunity to assist and facilitate in restructuring our facility. We combined 3 facilities into one. Shortly after that, I was given the opportunity to take over operations of the floor side of the business. We divided into 2, the office, the estimators, accountants, HR, and then the floor side is all basically a raw piece of material that comes in one door and goes out another door finished. Learned a lot through that, was able to work with some people, which was wonderful, both on the outside of the corporation and on the inside. Team building, I totally restructured our management structure at that time. Last year, my father was diagnosed with his second bout of cancer, and the family decided that we did not want to hire somebody from the outside, that we wanted a Renard and someone that had worked and grown up literally with our team to take over. And from there, I was given the opportunity to work with our team, called all the guys together, said I want to do 2 things. I want to make sure that Dad doesn't get bugged while he's fighting cancer, and that we give him something better. Because as he put it, he said, just status quo and don't burn the place down. So when I called the management team together, I said I want to give him something better than what he left us. So we were able to cut costs, reduce waste. We hired new people, we were able to purchase new equipment, and it was a wonderful experience how everyone rallied together.
What products does your company or companies make?
So we're custom fab manufacturing. The majority of what we do is proprietary. We're 2nd or 3rd tier, but literally you bring us a blueprint for anything and we can make it, especially if it has metal components in it.
I wish your dad well, I hope he does, but if you're running the company, why get into politics, which can be part or full-time, depending on how much you want to invest in yourself?
So thankfully, Dad is clear of cancer. I won the fight 2nd time around, and he's back at work. He's enjoying it. We have a phenomenal group of people and a wonderful leadership team. So we know the shop is in good hands. My grandfather, 2 things that have always stuck with me. My grandfather always said, you can't stand on the sidelines and complain about something if you're not willing to get in and do something about it. My dad always says, what keeps you up at night? Start with what keeps you up at night and keep working towards that till you fix it, you resolve it, and you get a good night's sleep.
What's the top issue in the Senate District 1?
So something that is near and dear to my heart, and when I contemplated running, the first thing I did is I sat down and just started Googling businesses. I had 35, 40 wonderful conversations. It took me 2 days, and I'd always start out the same way. Alex Renard, thinking about running as your state senator. Doesn't matter what side of the ticket I'm on, just tell me what you guys are dealing with. And the things that were brought up and that we discussed were all things I felt were in my wheelhouse. Number 1 being education and job training. I think it's imperative that we reinvest in our children's future and provide good training opportunities for individuals and families to have upward mobility.
What's the next step in both of those areas?
So I think that we have made a great stride so far. The Republican Party, the governor, and legislature so far have really pushed education and have spent more on it. Thankfully, the sparsity aid bill was passed this last session, which affects 4 school districts throughout the 1st Senate District. Mm-hmm. K through 12 education, especially in the more rural districts, it costs a little bit more to get kids to and from school, a little bit spread out. That shouldn't hinder them from having good funding and being able to achieve a good education. My primary opponent actually was one of only 2 individuals in the assembly that voted against this bill. It was the definition of teamwork, both parties reaching across the aisle and working together, and I would like to facilitate and have the opportunity to work more towards bills like that, especially when it comes to education.
Do both of do your companies now have hiring signs out?
We do.
What are the biggest problems finding qualified workers?
Qualified workers. It's great that the unemployment rate in the state of Wisconsin is low, and I'd like to
2.9.
It's wonderful, lowest it's been in history, correct?
Yeah.
I'd like to see that continue to trend downward. In part with that, though, is making sure that we tool up individuals and we provide the necessary training for them to enter the workforce. So something that we struggle with is finding the tech schools have been great. The STEM Center here, I was fortunate enough to work with bringing it here and petitioning it as a business owner to Northeastern Wisconsin, saying that the business community will support it. NWTC does a wonderful job tooling up and training individuals, but it's making that available to them, making them known that there are good trades, that are good paying jobs, that provide upward mobility for them and their families, that I think we have to get the message out. Especially with many of the baby boomers now retiring, they're realizing the American dream. There's going to be a massive skills gap in there. You think you see a lot of now hiring signs now and people, looking for a solution and complaining about it, it's only going to get worse.
The Democrats are using the Foxconn incentive package as a major issue in the campaign. You would have voted for that incentive package?
Being someone in the private sector, someone who sees what a good trade can provide for a family, a good high-paying job, I think it's important that we perpetuate legislation and create and foster an environment that not only allows our businesses here to continue to grow and flourish, but to bring businesses from outside of our state and even outside of the country here. Because
Will Foxconn be good for businesses in Senate District 1?
I hope so. I hope that we can utilize and leverage what they have and bring some of that work up here.
The governor proposed extending Foxconn incentives to Kimberly-Clark. Now, that did not pass. Would you have voted for that?
Once again, being able to facilitate businesses here. I've not read the bill in its entirely, but I would be a proponent of helping and assisting to bring good high-paying jobs in the area and maintaining them.
There's an impasse over how to fund future highway needs, construction and maintenance and repairs. If you could wave a wand, how would you solve that impasse?
If I could wave a wand, that would be a wonderful thing, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So
just to have that issue resolved. But
I've used it for a couple other things too.
Yes.
One of the things that we struggle with at Renco is throughout the state, there are businesses that we love buying their goods and products from. But this time of the year and other times of the year, there are weight restrictions on the road. Our infrastructure is an issue right now. And if we don't do something very soon, it's only going to continue to get worse. When it comes to all the issues and solutions that have been proposed for funding, basically at the end of the day, I'm an individual who doesn't like taxes. I don't like to see them raised. I do not want to see the overall tax burden of a family or individual in the state of Wisconsin or the first state Senate district increased. So if we could find a way, I mean, we have to do it in business. We had a piece of equipment that we thought we were going to get another 4 years out of, and unfortunately, it looks like we're going to get another 6 months out of it. It wasn't in our budget until 4 years down the road. We can't pass the buck. We don't want to just take out another loan and increase debt. So we're in the process, and I think we're very close to be able to find that money in some other areas for funding. I think we can do that on the state level too.
Without raising either the gas tax or the $75
Correct.
fee. The speaker's in favor of tolling. What's your position on tolling?
I think tolling is a very interesting and unique proposal and idea. I personally don't think that it would work as well as finding some money, even if we did create a gas tax, to be able to offset that by pulling that from somewhere else in the budget. Once again, so we don't increase the overall tax burden of a family. I'm not a big fan of tolling.
Local governments are increasingly pushing for action on what's been called the dark store controversy. Is that an issue in the 1st Senate District, Alex?
As a whole, I don't like the idea of the tax burden, once again, being increased on a family or a homeowner. In business, I know that's been going back and forth, and there's points on both sides. I think those are the opportunities where my private sector experience and someone who can bring people to the table, and then we can work through issues, will be valuable. Because at the end of the day, I do not want to see a homeowner's tax base increased anymore.
You don't want to see that shift from
Correct.
Commercial to residential.
Correct.
Should the UW system tuition freeze continue into the 7th and 8th year and into the next biennium?
Yes.
It should. Why?
Education, Aristotle, I believe, rough quoting here, is that education is the only provision for old age. Just like K through 12, I think it's imperative that we provide opportunities for individuals here in Wisconsin to educate themselves and to grow and flourish.
You mentioned the sparsity aid, which I think you said 4 school districts.
In the first state Senate district,
Right.
and across the state of Wisconsin for that matter.
I understand, just 4 in the 1st Senate
Yes.
district. But the larger issue is funding of K-12 schools. Do we put enough money in K-12 schools, or do we need even more?
I think education is one of those things that we can't skimp on the funding. We're literally educating and preparing children for our future. for their future.
School choice and vouchers, do you want to see it expanded now? It started out in Milwaukee, Racine, and
Yes.
now statewide. Should it be expanded further?
Yes.
Why?
I come from a family that my parents exercised their parental choice. I was homeschooled, so I think that's a phenomenal opportunity, and I think that's preserving parental rights to be able to have them choose where their children go to school and provide other opportunities for them.
I've seen on your website of you holding the huge fish, talking about your environmental
Yes.
issues. But let's get into some of the specific pollution problems in Kewaunee County with wells.
Yes.
Now, have you had a chance to study that? Have we hit bottom with the problem of pollution with those wells?
I think pollution and the environment, I mean, it's always ever going and changing. I think it's the thing that we have to continue to evolve and change and evaluate and make sure that we are changing in accordance. Representative Joel Kitchens, I think, has done an absolutely phenomenal job bringing people together in that district. There are streams that 5 generations ago our family used to fish that the fishing isn't what it used to be. So there's definitely a water issue. I mean, I spent my entire life on the bay and the streams out on Lake Michigan, and I come back to what Joel has done. He's brought all the parties to the table. Everyone's had their voice heard, and they've come to some great solutions, and I hope that we can have some legislation out of that coming up next year, and then I'll be able to be a part of that.
On your Facebook campaign page, you say, quote, government needs to be limited, end quote. What's the next step in putting limits on government?
So one of the things that is near and dear to me is reform and government reform. I think the do as I say, not as I do attitude has frustrated me, and I'm guessing it's frustrated many others. One of the pledges that I have made, because I believe that it starts with me, if you're not willing to stand up and actually act upon what you say, I think that's very misleading. Once again, do as I say, not as I do. Not a fan of that. Is I've agreed, since the Senate will be out of session in 2018, if elected, still work with constituents, still work with colleagues. There'll still be an office to handle constituent services and issues, but I will not collect a penny of per diem, and I will return my entire 2018 salary, since I won't actually be on the floor unless it's an extraordinary circumstance.
Okay. The whole issue of school safety involves gun laws. How do we make Wisconsin schools safer? Part one. Do we need any changes in gun laws? Part two.
So when it comes to laws across the board and gun laws, I think it's important that we actively work to enforce the laws that are already on the books. And the bigger issue when it comes to school safety, every child should have a safe environment in which to be educated. And I think that also goes, in my opinion, to putting those decisions in the hands of the local districts, the families, the parents, pulling that from Madison, and then the state should facilitate that.
Did Representative Jacques take any votes that you disagree with? You would have voted otherwise. Can you name some?
So personally, things that have happened in the past, things that people have voted in the past, I'm more concerned about going forward, what we can do and what we can affect.
Would you have voted for the prevailing wage bill?
Once again, all of that stuff is in the past, and I'm looking forward to what's happening going forward.
What's the first bill, if you're a senator, you're going to ask to sponsor?
First bill, for me, would be term limits. That's something that I think is very important. This is supposed to be a citizen legislature where we have created and fostered an environment of career politicians, rather than taking individuals from the private sector and the real world and putting them in place to use what they have learned and the knowledge that they have garnered to better the state and help their district and the people they want to serve.
Term limits, how long?
I would say, and I think this is a very generous and broad, I think 4 to 12 years is more than enough time to get something done in a single position.
Okay. Talk about the differences, please, between you in the primary, May 15th, and if you're the nominee in the general, June 12th.
I think it comes back again to my private sector experience. Being a job creator, someone who's balanced the budget to where I just can't continue to force money down the line in debt to our children and grandchildren. Andre has voted repeatedly to more than double the transportation debt, passing the buck. That's not being a fiscal conservative. In business, I can't continue to just pass the buck further down the line. Eventually, it's going to catch up to us.
Preparing for this interview, I ran into news stories. Clarify how long you've lived in the 1st Senate District, please.
That's a lovely one that keeps coming up. So to give you the full gamut.
I mean, I just Googled it, okay?
No. I'm sure.
I'm not trying to set you up.
No, I understand that. My family has and always will call northeastern Wisconsin our home. Almost 2 years ago, we immigrated from Lille, France. My father and grandfather have owned businesses that are in the district. To this day, we still employ over 20 employees that live in the district. They ran the Scotty 1 and Scotty 2 out of Sturgeon Bay and then Algoma. I grew up in the town of Scott, and I now live in De Pere.
Now live in De Pere. When you talk about red tape and career politicians, is career politicians a reference to your primary opponent?
Not directly. Career politicians is referenced at anyone who is a career politician. Someone who's spent their entire life in there. I mean, I'm the definition of an outsider. I have never been an elected official before. I haven't served in government. I've stepped up because I want to now. And I think, once again, a servant legislator and leadership is what the founding fathers and what was intended.
With someone with private business experience, your business has dealt with healthcare issues.
Yes.
Yes. So where do you stand on Medicaid funding and the next generation of healthcare issues, please?
Sure. I think if you walk it back just a little bit more recently too, we were promised a lot of things with Obamacare. None of those have come to fruition. Services have gotten worse. It's harder for doctors and nurses to do their jobs. Fees have gone up and are much higher. In business, we see that, where not only has the burden increased on us, but it's increased on our employees as well, and that's not something that's acceptable.
If you were a member of Congress, would you vote to repeal Obamacare?
I would, with another solution, hopefully a bipartisan solution that was put in place to replace it.
Okay, and it would look like what, if you could design it? Wave that wand again.
If I could wave the wand, I think the last bill was about this thick. I'd shoot for a bill that was maybe like this thick, and we'd get the experts and the doctors and the individuals in that field involved.
Okay, what other issues that are central to your campaign haven't I asked you about, please?
One that I came to realize is the revitalization of small town Wisconsin. And I think one of the ways that we can do that is by getting good, sustainable broadband and internet services to our small towns. It affects education, kids being able to research things, going online and submitting homework. Individuals and adults who want to tool up and train, whether to the great schools like NWTC or UWGB in the UW system, they don't have access to internet, they can't participate in online schooling. You look at business and commerce. If you can't connect to the internet, you cannot be an effective force in the economy, as well as even healthcare. I know there's individuals that have, one in particular up in Sturgeon Bay, a friend of the family, had a heart surgery and has a wireless heart monitor that the doctors can monitor him from his home. It affects education, the economy, and even healthcare. And I think that's something where the state needs to step up and really facilitate the growth and expansion of sustainable broadband and internet throughout the district.
Knowing how important tourism is to Door County and the larger Senate District 1, how healthy is the tourism industry in Senate District 1? Any changes you'd push for as a senator on the issue of tourism?
Sure. I think it is healthy. I think it's growing. You look at the businesses along the lakeshore, along the bay, and up through Door County. I think they're identifying what the customers need and want, and that's the entire idea of a laissez-faire economy. But I also look forward to the opportunity of working with them. I've never owned a resort. I've never owned a restaurant, never owned a bar, never owned a kayaking or excursion company, but I would hope that I can work with those individuals to help facilitate growth in their industries and their business.
Would you sponsor any changes in the tax code if you're a senator?
Specifically?
Yeah, anything with corporate taxes or any other type of taxes?
Not a fan of taxes.
Okay, okay. Any other issue you want to bring up before we close?
Another one too would be, I talk about government reform. I want to try to lead the charge on that. You've seen what happened where it took us a while to pass the last budget. Another bill that I would like to introduce and have the opportunity to is if you don't pass a budget, you don't get paid. In business, if I promise a customer a part and I call them up and say I'm going to be 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 months late, but you still got to pay me, I'm not going to have a customer anymore. And on the same sense, if it takes 2 days, 2 weeks, or 2 months to pass, once that budget is finally passed, the legislators don't get back pay for that either.
Your primary opponent says that you're the candidate of established Republicans. Do you want to respond to that? Former speakers, things like that?
I'm a Republican. I always have been. My family has been. I've supported candidates, Republican candidates, my entire life, both financially and by going door to door doing the work on the ground. So I'm an established Republican, just like many people are out there. But as far as an insider, that's the furthest thing from the truth.
If you win the nomination, I haven't given you a chance to talk about differences with the Democratic candidate. Do you want to discuss any of those?
I think once again, and I hope I'm given the opportunity that we'll be able to sit down and chat about that again in a little bit more depth. But once again, someone who is a job creator, someone who comes from the private sector, I want to bring that to the people, my friends, neighbors, family, the people who raised me and I grew up in the 1st State Senate District, and utilize that to give them a voice and a real powerful force down in Madison.
Okay, thank you. Alex Renard of Pere is one of 2 Republican candidates in the special election in Senate District 1. The primary is May 15th. The general election is June 12th. Alex, thanks so much for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you.